So I'm Yashas Donti. I'm the head of Google Developers Group, RVCE. We are the club that was mainly involved in organizing this event. So I'd like to say good evening to you all, and of course, good afternoon to Dr. Marcus, because it's afternoon where he's from. So Dr. Marcus is a professor at the Technical University of Applied Sciences, Würzburg-Schweinfurt, and he's an expert in digital and AI ethics. This event is mainly about ethical AI and the future of artificial intelligence. So this event is going to last for like 35 to 40 minutes. Near the end of the event, we'll have a 5-minute Q&A session where Dr. Marcus will be happy to answer whatever questions you guys have. So Gnanadeep, if you're there, I think you can take over.
So a very warm thank you from my side for this nice introduction. And I'm very pleased and honored to give you a short intro into AI ethics in this very vibrant surrounding and AI environment that we are facing at the moment. I think we are today at a decisive point in history, at a decisive point in time when it comes to the development of AI. I think we all feel that. I think you feel that. We feel that here also in Europe. And maybe to give you just a bit of context, I'm here in Würzburg, what is a rather small town in the southern part of Germany, but a town that has a long-standing history in teaching and researching. We have a university here, and we have a technical university, what is my institution, a University of Applied Science. We are doing applied research, applied science, and I'm with the Faculty of Computer Science and Digital Business Systems and doing digital ethics and media law here. Maybe just 2 words to my background. I'm a legal scholar by training, and on the other hand side, I'm also a political scientist, and I studied philosophy. So I'm trying to cover both sides of the coin, the research, the regulation side, and also the philosophical, the digital ethics side of normative perspectives on AI. So let's start with a short intro into AI ethics. I have to say at the beginning, AI ethics is a very broad field. We will see this in a minute. Let's start with this slide here. So maybe when you think about AI ethics, something like this comes to your mind, this very classic idea of the so-called trolley problem. Maybe you heard about this. If you didn't heard about this up to this point, no problem at all. Just Google it. I will not go deeper into these types of problems, ethical dilemmas, so to say, because trolley problems are discussed in AI ethics all the time. Trolley problems first appeared in the 1930s already, first proposed by Karl English in 1930. And with the advent of self-driving cars as systems of applied AI, these trolley problems that discuss how would a human decide when a trolley comes over, and the human is here in this position of deciding how to steer the trolley in this or that direction. How would the person who is in charge here, who is responsible for this decision, how would he or she deal with this dilemma situation of not having any opportunity, not having any option that wouldn't hurt anybody? And you can configure this trolley problem situation in almost an unlimited number of different configurations. So having elderly people on the one track and young people on the other track, having a bunch of people on one track, having just one person on the other track, and so on and so on. And these trolley problems have come to new relevance with self-driving cars. Nowadays, everybody everywhere is discussing situations like this, having a self-driving car, having an AI in the position of being the agent who is deciding. And this is discussed in AI ethics for years and years, and it's also very relevant when it comes to the development of such systems. I won't go deeper into this, as this is very classic. I just want to broaden your perspective now for a minute, what is also meant by AI ethics. So AI ethics is, in fact, as I already pointed out, a very broad field. So when you think about AI ethics, when you start to research AI ethics, when you start to study AI ethics, you will come across a bunch of topics. So it starts with human-machine relation. So what is human? What is the machine? What's the interrelation between humans and machines? Will machines become comparable to humans in any sense? Will they develop consciousness? How do we deal with machines being agents in our societies, getting more and more what can be called agency, comparable to what has been done and what have been decided by humans before. We see this in our society a lot as we are adapting AI, let's say, in fields like scoring systems. We will discuss scoring systems in detail in a few minutes. So the interrelation between humans and machines, that's the first broad topic that is highly relevant when it comes to AI ethics. The second one is then deduced from that the question of responsibility and liability. Also, my intro with this trolley problems pointed to that. So when we discuss AI and AI ethics, we have a lot of problems to discuss when it comes to responsibility and liability for this type of systems. Do we treat these systems as being agents on their own terms, or do we want to keep responsibility with the persons developing these systems or using these systems? Do we need something like an electronic person in law? Do we need to assign duties and risks and rights to AI systems? These are questions that are discussed in when it comes to responsibility and liability. Then we have the topic of job loss and transformation. Also a very relevant topic. I think you all heard of that. Maybe you all already discussed that. Will AI will the uptake of AI in more and more fields and more sectors lead to job losses? How do we deal with job profiles being transformed by AI, being now coming in the phase to be not just an assistant system, but taking over more and more parts of what have been done by humans before? Then we have this very broad and very relevant question of privacy and data access. So as you all know, you know much better than me as you are engineers, how these systems are trained, what you need to train these very relevant systems. You need these lots and lots of data. You need these huge data sets. And so you have personal data in these data sets almost all the time. And then the questions of data protection and privacy arise. And also the question of who has control over these data sets and who has access to the data. And what also have to be said here is that sustainability is of utmost relevance when it comes to AI ethics. So AI systems have a huge power demand, as you all know. Especially those systems that we all discussed today, so large language models and generative AI in all kinds have a huge power demand, but also a huge demand in when it comes to water, especially in the training phase. And as you maybe know, the prospects for the power demand are in a way that the power demand will rise in the next years for AI, and it will rise exponentially. So sustainability is a severe topic to discuss when it comes to AI ethics. And then we have the question of intellectual property. Just to give you here a short overview about dimensions that are relevant for AI ethics. Intellectual property, on the one hand side, when it comes to IP content in training data sets. So as you maybe know, the providers, the manufacturers of large language models are using almost everything that's out there in the internet. They are scraping these data and introduce them into their training data sets. And the question is that allowed in terms of copyright law? Is that even possible or legal in terms of copyright law? A highly relevant question, and also already discussed before the courts. There are court procedures going on between copyright holders and manufacturers of large language models, providers of large language models, especially in the US, but also here in Europe. And that's the one hand side of the intellectual property problem. The other hand is if the output of these models of generative AI is protected in terms of copyright, and who has, in fact, rights when it comes to the output of these models. Do the providers of these models have the rights when it comes to copyright, or do the users of the system that generate content hold the copyright in the content that is produced? So intellectual property also a very relevant topic. And then we have deepfakes and disinformation. So I think you all have come across that AI is highly relevant and has the potential to be used to create deepfakes and to create a bunch of disinformation. And that's also of utmost relevance from an ethical point of view. But that's all. That are all very relevant dimensions of AI ethics, but not what I want to speak about in detail in the next minutes. I want to lead you now to the in-depth discussion a bit of what I have decided to be the core topic of our short exchange today, and that's the question of biases and discrimination in and by AI. So biases in AI and discrimination by AI systems. So we want to discuss this for the next few minutes. And I have two case studies for you to introduce you to this topic and to the ethical considerations that go along with it a bit deeper in the next minutes. The first case study that I want to show you is the case of Apple Card. So you maybe heard of Apple Card, a system introduced by Apple in 2019 in the US, and it's more or less a credit card. So a digital credit card that you have on your Apple device, on your Apple iPhone, that you can order in the US. It's provided in cooperation with MasterCard on the one hand side. So it's a credit card on your phone, and it's integrated in the Apple Pay service. So you're maybe familiar with that you are able to pay with your iPhone, at least in a lot of markets globally. And for some markets, Apple decided also to introduce not just the payment service, but also a credit card that is combined with this payment service. And this credit card has been offered in the US, but not just by Apple themselves. They didn't have a bank license to do so, but in cooperation with Goldman Sachs, with the investment bank Goldman Sachs. Goldman was the bank that decided to go to the end user, to the consumer market with this new credit card. Before that, they weren't on the consumer market; they were just in the investment banking sector. But by starting this Apple Card, they came to the decision to go to the consumer market as well. And what happened then? Apple issued this offered and published this new offer of a credit card, and then this happened. Maybe you came across this discussion here on X, or formerly known as Twitter. DHH here is David Heinemeier Hansen, a very prominent figure in the European engineering scene, and also a VC investor for startups, for digital startups, and a very prominent figure here in Europe. And David Heinemeier Hansen pointed to the fact that Apple Card is, from his point of view, a biased program. He told here on X that his wife and he himself had joint tax returns and lived in a community property state, as they have been married for a long time. But still, Apple's black box algorithm, as he calls it, thinks that he deserved a 20 times more credit line than his wife. So a credit line that is 20 times higher than the one of his wife. And he tried to appeal to this and tried to get somebody at Apple to get this corrected, to get his credit line and the level of the credit line of his wife leveled up, so to the same niveau. But it didn't work out. So he didn't get in contact with somebody responsible at Apple. And then the person who is answering here to him is Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, in fact. So one of the leading figures in the early days of Apple, one of the two founders, the second person besides Steve Jobs who founded Apple. And he tells what is, from my point of view, a bit funny, that the same thing happened to him as he got 10 times the credit limit in comparison to his wife, and they also are in a community property state, and they also have joint assets. This has been the case in 2019, and what has happened here? Actually, this led to an official procedure by the finance authorities. And the finance authority in New York, as Goldman Sachs Goldman Sachs headquarters is at Wall Street in New York. The finance authorities of New York started an investigation here, and Apple and Goldman stated in this investigation that they didn't use gender, ethnicity, age, or sexual orientation in the automated calculation of the credit limit. So they stated, okay, we do automated calculations to assign and allocate credit limits and credit lines. So we do something like we have introduced here a scoring system, and with this automated scoring system, we allocate the credit lines. But we do not use this classical data types that are more or less the traditional ones that could be used and that are the usual suspects when it comes to discrimination, like gender, ethnicity, age, and so on. But how did it come that then the wives, or so the women, get a lower credit limit than the men in this new service? They tracked, in fact, and used data on shopping behavior. That was the result of this investigation. That's what came. That was published during this investigation. So they didn't use the classic discriminatory data categories, but they used data on shopping behavior. And shopping behavior, in fact, in the US, is very dependent on gender identification. So women shop in a different way than men. More, at least in from a statistical point of view. So women have more transactions on average. They shop different things in comparison to men in the US. So they used a type of data that is more or less a proxy for gender. They didn't use gender to calculate a limit, but they used a proxy for this type of data. That's what we call in AI ethics a so-called proxy bias. So we have here, in this case, a proxy bias. So the system didn't process data on a classic category of discriminatory potential, like gender or ethnicity or age, but it processed, in this case here of Apple card, it processed a proxy data that is that has a very strong correlation to the classical discriminatory data. So the output is produced of the system based on a calculation that has its roots in behavioral proxy data. And that's what we call a proxy bias. So the system is still biased without using classical discriminatory data categories. Proxy biases. And that's the first thing I want to point you to, that proxy data is very relevant. When you want to get rid of biases, you have also to check for proxies. Second case study that I want to show you is Compass. Compass is a system in the US, used in the US. Compass is an acronym for correctional offender management profiling for alternative sanctions. So the system is used in US courts in the situation where offenders ask for parole. So offenders in the US that are imprisoned have the chance to get parole on a regular basis. Let's say after 3 years or after 5 years, they can ask for parole, and then a court or a jury has to decide, okay, does this imprisoned offender get parole and get out of prison or not? And Compass is an assistance system for these type of decisions, and it's manufactured by a company called Northpoint. Nowadays, they changed the name to Equivent. It's still in use in the US, also after this publications here from 2016. The company is saying that they use 137 criteria to calculate a risk score. And the risk score that's calculated here is the risk that an offender will re-offend again if he or she gets parole. So if the jury or the court decides to give this this offender, this imprisoned offender, a parole, will this offender, when he or she gets out of prison, offend again? Will he or she realizes some crimes? That's the risk that's calculated by the system based on over 130 criteria. And this system has been checked then in 2016 by ProPublica in a very prominent publication, very prominent case. Actually, the system is used in a number of US states, including New York, Wisconsin, California, and so on. And I will show you now what have been the result of this check by ProPublica. First, I want to show you anecdotal evidence, so to say. So first, one case. You see here Vernon Prater, one offender on the one hand side, and he was scored low risk by Compass. And then we have on the other hand side, Trisha Borden. She is scored high risk. What was the data that flew into this calculation? Vernon Prater had prior offenses, 2 armed robberies, 1 attempted armed robbery, so very severe crimes. And actually he re-offended again. After getting parole, he had this low risk score, and he re-offended again, 1 grand theft. And Trisha Borden had 4 juveniles or minor crimes, misdemeanors, and she didn't re-offend. She didn't get parole, maybe, and she didn't re-offend afterwards. So this is just the story of two offenders, just anecdotal evidence. But when we now look at the distribution of the risk scores that are calculated by Compass, then we see a very relevant result. So here's the distribution of these Compass scores for white defendants. So white offenders, white defendants. And as you can see, the distribution is decreasing. So you have a very, you have the low risk score of 1. So the risk score scale is from 1 to 10. And you have, in the most cases, a risk score of 1 up to 600 cases. And it's decreasing when the risk score gets higher and higher. And when you now compare this to black defendants, you see a total different distribution. Here you see that risk scores for black defendants calculated by Compass are almost even distributed. So the distribution here is almost even for all the different steps of the ladder, so to say, steps of the scale from 1 to 10. And what turned out in this check by ProPublica in 2016 is that this system here is highly biased. So the Compass system has been highly biased, at least at the status in 2016. So for white defendants, your chance to be labeled high risk but not to re-offend. So ProPublica checked if the people who were associated with a certain risk score did re-offend or not re-offend afterwards. So the quote of people being labeled high risk but did not re-offend for whites was around 25%. Labeled low risk but yet did re-offend almost 50%. And it's almost turned around for African Americans, so for persons of color. Here you see that persons of color had the chance to be labeled high risk but didn't re-offend of almost 50%, and labeled low risk but yet did re-offend 28%. So the system was biased when it comes to ethnicity. And that led to very severe consequences for those who were scored by the systems, as the system is more or less decisive for the decision if you get parole or not. So this is a very relevant system, and it turned out that it is highly biased when it comes to ethnicity. And that's what we call an error rate bias. This is the case group of an error rate bias. The bias arises from an unequal distribution of the system's systematic errors. So you can understand the case that this system, that compass is attributing to you a very high risk score and you don't reoffend to be a systematic error. And this systematic error of the system is unevenly distributed for these different ethnic groups. And this comes with large social costs for this group. So this compass system is one very prominent example for that. Here, the data that flew back to the system, that come back to the system via the feedback loop, are only produced by those criminals that are let out of prison, so that are scored low risk, then let out of prison, had the chance to reoffend in fact, and those then come back before a court, and these data fly back to the system via a feedback loop. So only false positive cases are used for error correction in this type of systems. False negatives are not used for error corrections here. So as people who get false negatives, so a very high risk score without reoffending, these people will still be in prison, right? So if you get a high risk score, you don't have the chance to get out of prison, at least on a regular basis. So you stay in prison and you don't have the chance to prove that this high risk score is wrong in your personal individual case. So the system is constructed in a way that false negatives don't come back to the system via a feedback loop. And so the system is just correcting itself via the feedback loop in a way that it gets stricter and stricter and stricter and only reacting to false positive cases. The same is true for the most credit scoring systems. So credit scoring systems have a high risk, a high tendency to be constructed in a way that only false positives are flying back via the feedback loop into the systems and are used for error correction. So think about credit systems. If you have a low credit score, you don't get the credit, you don't get the loan. So you don't have a chance to prove that you would pay back the money in time. If you have a low credit score, you won't get the loan. If you have a low score in applicant rating system in human resources, you don't get the jobs. You don't get a chance to prove that you are the right person for the job, that the score calculation has been wrong in your case. Only those who get a high score and then prove that they don't pay back the money in the case of a loan, or don't prove that they are the right people for the job. Only in these cases, false negative cases, only then a feedback loop is closed, and only then the system is correcting itself. So let's see it in an abstract slide here. You have a risk scoring system, you have training data for this risk scoring system. This risk scoring system is giving a positive score to you. Oh, that's good. You get the desired good. Let it be a loan, let it be a parole decision, let it be a job. But then the risk realizes. And so, and this then flies back into the training data via a feedback loop. You fail in your job, you don't pay back the money to the loan, you re-offend after getting the parole. So this is actually recognized by the system. This is coming back to the training data. This is then used to further train the system. But if you get a negative score, you don't get the desired common good. You don't get the loan, you don't get the job, you don't get the parole. So you have no chance of checking whether the risk assessment that has been done by the risk scoring system was correct, in fact. So no feedback loop is closed here. So you have a constructual problem with these type of risk scoring systems in a lot of cases, in a lot of situations. And this is actually producing a very relevant ethical and societal problem. These systems are very relevant for the distribution of benefits, credits, paroles, jobs, but these systems are only optimized in the sense of awarding the benefits to in the most restrictive way possible. And actually pre-existent biases that are out there in societies will be reinforced by those type of systems, as you can see in the case of Compass. So these systems, in fact, establish self-fulfilling prophecies, so to say. So give me just 2 more minutes, or let's say 3 more minutes, to talk a bit about how to solve this. So how can we solve this, and why should we solve this? In engineering, in designing these systems, let's have a strong argument for that. The strong argument is provided by the so-called Collingridge dilemma. So why is ethical assessment of such systems needed already in the development process? Why it is relevant to think about ethical considerations already during development and designing those systems? David Collingridge provided a very good argument for that. When you think about a new technology, the flexibility when it comes to the design of this new technology is decreasing over time. What does that mean? So when you think about smartphones, what we all had in mind when it comes to a smartphone was very flexible, maybe in the early 2000s. But after the iPhone, nobody had any idea of how a smartphone could look like than this very simple black things here, right? So then you think about GPT and chatbots. Nobody had a clue how the interface of chatbots will look alike, but then GPT came out and design flexibility shrinked to a situation where nowadays we all think about chatbots and we all have in mind this very simple user interface that we see when we use this OpenAI products, or let it be Claude or Gemini or whatsoever. So design flexibility of new technologies shrinks over time, but our knowledge of effects increases over time. And we don't have so much knowledge of the societal effects of a new technology when we start the development, but we will get this knowledge over time. And that's a dilemma. We have a two-bound situation here, a typical double-bind problem of information. We have an information decrease in design flexibility and information increase in knowledge of effects. And that means that in the situation at the beginning, it makes sense to try to get the best knowledge of effects already during the development, and it makes sense. It is a very strong argument here why ex post regulation, so after the market introduction of new technologies, after systems going live, is not enough. So classical state regulation, so to say. It's necessary to establish ethical guidelines and assessment procedures for all stakeholders already during development and deploying AI, as design flexibility will decrease. Yeah, and knowledge of effects will increase. So we should try to get the best knowledge and to get the best ethical insights already at the beginning of the development process. And that leads us to responsible research and innovation. Responsible research and innovation it's the approach how this could be done, developed by this leading figure, Virginia Dignam. And all relevant stakeholders and societal actors should be integrated as far as possible in the responsible research and innovation process during development. We should try to establish open development, and this should follow the RRT principles. So the first one is accountability of the system. We should always safeguard that the system is accountable to us. We should try to establish distributed responsibility of all stakeholders involved. We should try to come up with a distribution agreement. Who is responsible for what when it comes to our new AI-driven system? Who's responsible for the development? Who's responsible for this module? Who's responsible for data? Who's responsible for what? And the third point is transparency of the AI system. That's the third essential element of responsible research and innovation. We should safeguard that our AI systems are transparent. Just two more slides. Okay, I know it's a lot of content and I know it's evening for you, so just two more slides and then I'm happy to answer your questions. So what do we have to do to get this done during development? We have to link values to norms to functionalities. So we have to clear our ethical values, our values that are decisive for our efforts, for our ethical viewpoint to the system. And we have to do something where we get clear on all the values that all the stakeholders in the project have. And then we have to link this to norms. So we have to make this concrete. What does that mean that we want to have maybe an unbiased system? What does that mean that we want to have a responsible, accountable system in terms of norms? And then we have to pin that down to functionalities. So if you are interested in digging deeper into that, maybe you have a look into Virginia Dignam's Responsible Artificial Intelligence from 2019, still a very good book on this. Here's the main slide copied out of this book, how to do this AI system design. should link values to norms to functionalities, and this should be done in a structured manner. And how does this process could look like? At the beginning, we have to identify all the relevant stakeholders for the project. Then we have to elicit values and the requirements for all stakeholders in the development process. We have to provide a mean to aggregate the values and to the value interpretation for all stakeholders. A way to how this could be achieved is to have a starting workshop, so a kickoff workshop with all the stakeholders in the project to make all the, then do it, to collect all the values and then maybe to collect them in a wiki. So what could be done is to have a wiki that aggregates the values and the value interpretations for all stakeholders. And then we have to come up with a plan how to build up formal links between values, norms, and the system functionalities. So which of the system functionalities are decisive for when it comes maybe to equality, or when it comes to freedom of choice, or when it comes to user autonomy. So we have to link those norms and values that we identify to be decisive for our project to the system functionalities. And in the fifth step, somebody has to be in charge, somebody has to take over responsibility to provide support from an ethical viewpoint when it comes to the selection of system components, but also when it comes to the maintenance of the system by all the stakeholders involved. And this should be done not just at the beginning in one sequence, but through the whole development process. So from day one until the project is finished, until the thing is going live. That's the concept of having ethical assessments in the development process based on this idea of responsible research and innovation. So that's it from my side when it comes to my input to you. And now I'm very happy to answer your questions if there are some. I will stop the presentation here. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your interest up to this point. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions now.
Yeah, so I personally think this was a very, very interesting session. This was a very interesting session, and I'd like to personally thank Dr. Markus for it. Because just to quickly summarize it, we started with the trolley problem, we spoke about humans and machines, and then we spoke about privacy and IP and deep fakes. And the two case studies were very interesting because the Apple Card case study, I think it sort of represents discrimination based on your sexual representation, even though that wasn't the intention. That's what essentially ended up happening, right? And with respect to the Compass prison system in the US, it was on the racial grounds rather than sexual, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So these were very interesting to learn about. I think now we can move on to our Q&A session, and Ridha will be taking over from my team.
Hello, Dr. Markus. Hello, everyone. I'm also a member of GDG. So thank you so much for your speech. A lot of us are actually working on bias mitigation projects right now. So this is a really relevant topic, and it gave us a lot of insight. So thank you. So does anyone in the audience have any questions? Okay,
So
while they
I have a
think
question
of something.
actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I have a question. So I think initially Dr. Markus mentioned that he's a legal scholar and also a political scientist, right? So it's great that you are, because I have some questions that would be very relevant to you. I think recently, I think in 2024, the European Union passed the AI Act, right? And
Yeah.
the AI Act, there's been a lot of debate and a lot of conversation about it. Many business owners think that it stifles innovation and it's just too much regulation, and it might leave the European Union behind. But then obviously there are proponents who say that it's a good thing because it prevents bias and discrimination and all those things. So could you share your views on this?
Yeah, actually, thanks for the question. Yeah, actually, the DAI Act is one of my all-time favorite topics at the moment, as everybody's asking me about that. Actually, it's true. We have now this new regulation here in Europe. It's already finished and will get in force in the next month. So the first part of the regulation will get enforced in February, and then we have a transition period over 2 years. And let me give you just a very short impression what this regulation is about. It has more or less a pyramidal structure in its basic concept. So there's a very strong regulation. So some AI practices are banned. So social scoring is banned when it is a society-wide social scoring system. Is prohibited in the European Union now. Also, emotion surveillance in workplaces is now prohibited in the Union. So there are 8 bans in this regulation. Then we have high-risk AI systems, and these high-risk AI systems are deeply regulated. So you have to do risk assessment procedures for high-risk AI systems and risk mitigation measures. And high-risk AI systems are those systems that are steering infrastructures, or automated cars are also seen as high-risk AI systems. And then we have transparency rules for limited risk AI systems like chatbots or generative AI, or the most types of generative AI. And we have then the 4th category of no risky AI, so to say. These are AI spam filters or AI in gaming. And yeah, a lot of companies are fearing that this will hinder innovation in Europe. Actually, we have a lot of startups here in Europe on AI, and actually we see that we have a huge diversity in Europe. We have very diverse societies here. We have Northern Europe that is not in any form comparable to Southern Europe, and we have this bunch of languages. So in this type. When it comes to these criteria, Europe is more or less comparable to India, which is also a very, very diverse country. And this diversity lets us to be very innovative, as we have so many different people with so many ideas. So for my take is that this AI Act is maybe not so hindering when it comes to innovation. It's more hindering when it comes to scaling up new businesses. So that's maybe the problem, as the AI Act is not differentiating in terms of the size of companies developing AI. So there's no the provisions of the AI Act are security law and safety and security laws, and these safety and security laws are addressing companies irrespective regarding their size. And so small companies will have a hard task to scale up, as they will face, if they develop high-risk AI system in terms of the AI Act, they will face high regulatory burdens from day one. And this will maybe be the problem with the AI Act, that we will have problems in scaling up new ideas and new innovations. And it will be interesting to see if the so-called process effect will kick in. That's the idea of the European Commission, that this regulation will be the gold standard for global, from a global perspective also, so that global players will try to match with the standard of the European AI Act, as they have been done with the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So the European Commission is hoping that the AI Act will be the second success story after the GDPR when it comes to the so-called process effect, and will introduce a new gold standard on a global level. So that's something, yeah, we have to see how this turns out. I'm not quite sure if this will happen, as we see so much development when it comes to AI in India, in Asia, in the US, and yeah, we will have to see if this process effect will kick in or not.
Sure, I think that was a very detailed response, so thank you for that. Could you also address the questions in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, I see in the chat. I see this question when it comes to enterprises and companies that are that are minimizing costs and trying to get rid of regulatory burdens. And the question, I think, if I get it correctly, is how better regulation could be done when it comes to companies, right? Yeah. Actually, regulation is a very interesting field, and actually, I think better regulation is regulation that is using not just one instrument to get to hold people responsible and to hold companies responsible, but that is trying to use and it combines a lot of different instruments. So we have the classical instrument of command and control regulation by the state and supervision by authorities. So. But we have also instruments of self-regulation and regulated self-regulation. And actually, it has been come to, from my understanding, we have been come to the insight that, in fact, incentives are very decisive for companies. So if you give them the incentive to be compliant, and if you provide them advantages in being compliant with regulation, then you get much better compliance. And it has to be for them an advantage, not just to get rid of risks of non-compliance and not be compliant just out of fear, but be compliant out of a positive and an advantage-driven perspective on regulation. And this could be done by having positive incentives in regulatory frameworks. So giving companies positive advantages and positive incentives in regulation. That's a hard thing to do, to design these regulatory frameworks in a way that they provide positive incentives, but it's possible. Also, when it comes to AI. So in the AI Act, we have the so-called regulatory sandboxes. So companies we will see in each and every member state a regulatory sandbox, and in the sandboxes, the companies can test their AIs. And during this test period, the authorities responsible, the market surveillance authorities, they will guide them and they will give them advice on their AI systems. They will give them also insights on the risk and assessment and mitigation procedures. And this is, from my point of view, a very good idea to provide companies safe and secure surroundings in which they can develop their new AI systems, and in which they can also train their staff to be compliant with the new AI Act without fearing that that sanctions will kick in. And this is maybe a blueprint for better regulation. So regulation that is adaptive to what companies are thinking about, regulation that is adaptive also to the logic that that drives companies. Okay, then we have, I think, the question on okay, we have environmental sustainability. I see environmental sustainability here as a question. How can the AI community balance high computational needs of AI models with environmental sustainability while still encouraging innovation? Yeah, actually, we have to come back to the principle of efficiency. So maybe we have lost track a bit when in development of not having efficiency as a core value of our developer efforts anymore. When you look at the actual models that are out there, they are very functional. They are very capable of processing data and solving tasks, but they are not efficient in any sense. So it takes so much more power to have a perplexity prompt than using Google to search for something. And I think we have to come back to have efficiency as one core value in development. So we have to make our algorithms, our databases much more efficient, and efficiency has to be part of our core efforts of all of us as developers. Again, that's a very relevant task for all of us, to develop an ethos, an ethical viewpoint on what we are doing that is driven by not just by autonomy, not just by equality, but also by efficiency, technical efficiency of the systems. That's very relevant. And we have to think about, okay, do we need, for all the tasks that we do we all need in every case a Gen AI, a large language model? Couldn't we do this with maybe technologies that are not so power consuming, that's very, very relevant from my point of view.
Also,
Okay.
I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I'd like to
Yeah,
add
sure.
something to your response. So I think in the past few months, we've noticed a lot of big tech companies like Meta, Google, and Microsoft. They've been investing in these nuclear fusion startups. Uh,
Yeah.
so nuclear fusion is a very environmental friendly process, unlike nuclear fission. And even if there's like an explosion or a leak, nothing bad is going to happen, and it's not going to cause a lot of damage to the environment. So, and nuclear fusion is also a self-sustaining mechanism which produces energy without using any fossil resources or anything, right? So,
Yep.
this more investment into this area, I think, would lead to more sustainability in the field of AI. Does that make sense?
That makes sense from my point of view. So we have to invest more in technical innovations that lead out of this dilemma of power consumption. And maybe another way to go is also quantum computing. So we have to level up our computing powers. So to get rid of so quantum computing is much more efficient when it comes to comparing power consumption with computing power. So we have to level up our computational powers, our computational capabilities. And quantum computing is maybe one way to go. But actually, we have to combine all these different approaches to come to a solution here. There's not just one way to go, but we have to come up with better power sources that are eco-friendly, sustainable. We have to stick to the principle of efficiency in development, and we maybe have to level up our computational powers when it comes to quantum computing, and combining all these approaches together with a societal approach that we foster our engagement in sustainability in general. This will lead us out of the dilemma that we are facing nowadays, that we are trapped in this hockey stick functions when it comes to power consumption and the use of natural resources and so on. That is in fact a very severe problem. So we have to be aware of that, and yeah, we have to deal with that, and we have to cope this.
Absolutely.
Okay, so actually, even I have a question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
currently, I'm working with a few of my teammates on bias mitigation, and we saw some similar case studies to the one you showed today,
Mhm.
the two case studies. So we're trying to build an algorithm similar to the Fair Learn and AI fairness frameworks. So
Okay.
do you have any insights on how we can make such an algorithm that will mitigate bias while still ensuring the accuracy of the ML model?
Yeah, actually, I'm not an engineer, so I can't help you on the technical side. But when it comes to bias as a concept, um, you have to you have to be aware that bias is a socially constructed concept. So there is not a standing definition of what is a bias. So actually, this developed over time. So 200 years ago, gender discrimination hasn't been a problem that has been discussed in societies, right? So think about the Middle Ages. Nobody discussed about gender discrimination in the Middle Ages. Nobody discussed about racial discrimination in the Middle Ages. So you have to keep in mind that this is a socially constructed concept that is also a bit in development all the time. So that leads you to the task to define for your project what you assess to be a bias. And maybe you could use some insights from regulation and legal literature on what biases are. So there are standing criteria for biases in law. And in law, biases are understood as unfair and unproportionate or unlegitimate discrimination. So you have to have a differentiated treatment of certain groups or certain persons. And the criteria, which is the one who is decisive for this differential treatment, this criteria then have to be assessed. Is this something that we think could be legitimized by a rational ground, on a rational ground or not? And this is a discursive process. So build up a team, do something like a workshop, and then decide, okay, we do so we try to get rid of the classical biases that we have in the literature, gender, ethnicity, racial biases, and so on, but also be open for new categories of biases and proxy biases. And this could be done best with having a diverse team, starting with integrating most perspectives as possible, the most perspectives as possible, and starting with a workshop and trying to have research on, okay, what is discussed in literature, what is discussed before the courts of being new forms of biases, and integrate this into your assessment. And then you have maybe a list of 40, 50 criteria that could be relevant when it comes to discriminations, and this could be then the basis to develop the signals for your algorithm.
Thank you so
But
much.
yeah, so diversity in the team, diversity in perspectives is key when it comes to the discussion of equality. That's key.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Marcus. I'm Dr. Meenal
Yeah.
here.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and for this wonderful talk. Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. A pleasure.
Yeah, same here. So sorry, I don't know what is your timings. We already crossed the whatever the 8:15 we are supposed to finish
Yeah,
it. But
I have to go in 5 minutes as I have another
okay.
appointment. It's
So
still afternoon here, so I have
can
I have
understand.
5 more minutes, but yeah.
Okay, so we can address one more question, right? Maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. One of you can ask one more question, please. Yeah.
I
Okay,
see here another
yes.
question in the chat. Should I answer that? So, what are your thoughts on balancing the ethical imperative to combat disinformation through regulation with the risk of curbing creative expression and innovation in AI-generated content? Yeah, actually, there was also another question in the chat on disinformation. So disinformation is a very relevant problem. Deepfakes are a relevant problem. And in fact, regulating disinformation is a very sensitive task. So it's a sensitive task in Europe. It's a sensitive task. I think also in your political system, it's also a very relevant and sensitive task. And there are huge discussions going on when it comes to disinformation. So what is disinformation? In fact, you have to differentiate disinformation from malinformation and from disinformation is just false statements. So that are provable false when it comes to the factuals that are referenced. And how to regulate this? Actually, we have nowadays the discussion between two concepts, more a community-based concept to have flagging systems on social platforms and so on and then communities discussing if this is disinformation or not, and the so-called flagger approach. So fact checkers or trusted flaggers, and the European approach is more to go in this direction, not just to give it to the community, but to give platforms the obligation to implement a moderation system, to implement at least some type of system in which content can be checked by the community or by fact-checking organizations. And Europe is more going the way to have fact-checking organizations checking these type of contents that are flagged by users. But who are then the fact-checking organization? And it's very relevant that these couldn't be station players. So it couldn't be the state who checks for information, as this would lead to a situation where opinion formation and information is not free anymore from state intervention. So we have in Europe now coming up new organizations, new type of non-governmental organizations who are supported by state means, so with state money, but are not dependent from the state and are not commanded by state authorities or something. And these are more or less journalists who are working there, and they are then checking disinformation that is flagged in the services. That's the way how Europe is going, and it's a different approach from the US, as you have heard maybe during the last days. In the US, we see now that the platforms are trying to get rid of these flagger systems and fact-checking systems. Yeah, and actually, does that hinder innovation? Does that hinder creative expression? Yeah, actually, there is maybe a risk, and we have to get, so from my point of view, we have to keep our discourse as open as possible. So keep the discourse as open as possible. But actually, disinformation is problematic for open discourse. So we have to deal with it. And I think the regulated, self-regulatory approach in Europe is not the wrong way to deal with that. To have a regulatory framework provided by the state, but then private actors deciding on the quality of information, or if information is disinformation or not is decided by editorial organizations, by journalistic organizations, not by the state, and actually not by the platform providers themselves. I think that's the right way to go, but that's debatable, and I know that there are different approaches on that.
Thank you so much.
Sure. So actually, as I have to leave for my next appointment, I'm very happy that I had a chance to discuss with you today, and I'm very pleased and honored that so many of you shared your time with me. I know that it's already in the evening, and it's already late. So thanks for being with me in this exchange. Thanks for hearing to my talk. And actually, if anybody of you is interested in reaching out, I showed my contact data. You find me in the internet, find me on LinkedIn. So don't hesitate to get in contact, get in touch if you have any further things to discuss. If you're interested in the things that we are doing here in Würzburg, we have a very nice master's degree in artificial intelligence. So if you're interested in that, don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. I think Gyanadeep has like a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, sir, and we are very grateful to have you join us today, despite your busy schedule, and to share your insights and experiences. And we are eager to learn from this journey, and thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, so thank you all, and it was a pleasure. Thank you. So enjoy your evening. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend, and maybe we will meet again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.